Ladies, gentlemen, am I often forgotten, but certainly not by me. Lucky Charms, welcome to the channel and welcome to another guide. In this guide, we're going to be taking another look at Magic ED2. Since the FSOA has been nerfed, I feel like I'm obligated to go back and redo all of my guides that have anything magic related, as keeping all of the old guides up is probably not the best idea, being that they're outdated and have bad information now. And while the dungeon run itself is not going to be largely changed to that much, I feel like the change was drastic enough on the bosses that we should probably just go through and try out some new stuff, see what works, see what doesn't. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this guide. So here I have a general preset loaded up, and that's what we're going to be going over. We'll go over the gear, the equipment, everything like that, and I'll just kind of give you my reasoning for bringing each piece. So I do have a second set of Tectonic. It is a Barrow set. This is the one that I just use for holding Elite Dungeon or Slayer perks, whatever you'd like to call them. And it has things like Undead Slayer, Dragon Slayer, things like that kind of baked into it on the secondary perks, so that way I can take advantage of the extra damage that ED2 and 3 can offer. But obviously in ED2, the main one is going to be Dragon Slayer. You can either combo it in on Biting, you could combo it in on your Invigorating, or you could even combo it in with Impatient. Now you will notice with this setup, there is no Enhanced Devoted in here, or even a regular Devoted, and since the rework doesn't punish dual wield camp, most people are now opting out of taking Invigorating off of the gear. However, with 4 ticking Invig definitely still adds up over time, and so if you're going for the full top end effect, I would highly recommend keeping your Invigorating on there. But other than that, it's kind of standard practice with Biting and Impatient and Crackle 4, Relent 5. Impatient will give you extra adren here and there. Crackle 4 is just a nice hit that'll occasionally go out. Relentless 5 is really nice as it'll save adrenaline. And Biting is there for crit chance, which is still the key for magic. Now as far as my weapons are concerned, they are just the standard setup P6 AS1, AS4 E2. And on the FSOA, I have P6 R1, Aftershock 4 equal 2. There's nothing really changed here. The Bow of the Last Guardian here is completely overkill. It's just a placeholder so I can use my SGB spec, because my physical SGB is sitting in my keepsake box and I don't want to remove it just for an SGB swap. I just bring the EOF and the Bow of the Last Guardian, but whichever setup you have for SGBing, go ahead and use that. I would suggest trying to use some type of bow rather than say a Ruby SGB, because the dragon arrows do work with the spec on all the bosses, which is pretty much where I use SGB spec. I don't really use it too much on mob clearing per se, but the 3 bosses, it's pretty nice to have that kind of semi-delete button. But for the 3 bosses, since they are large targets, it's kind of nice to have a quick delete button, and 30% damage is always welcomed. This T88 here is just a Coroming swap. It works with G-Chain to give you some really good AoE damage. Lucky Charms are just there for a little bit of extra GP when running the dungeon. The mines are useful on most of the trash mobs. Most of the dragons are susceptible to mines. The lava strikes are. The arms at BSD are susceptible to mines. You can technically use mines on the spire that Verak spawns. Overall, if you have mines, I do suggest bringing them, but if you don't have mines, it's not the absolute end of the world. You can just chug through the extra bit of damage and you'll be just fine. The only other bits to note are my EOF just has Gothic Staff in it. As of time of recording, we don't have anything else really worthwhile to bring as a second EOF. This EOF, again, just has my SGB spec in it. And the rest of the preset's pretty straightforward. Just a decent amount of food. I just use Super Gothics and Blue Blubber for their healing potential, but I don't swap to Brews because I don't want my stats to drain. I feel the extra healing from Super Brews or regular Brews is not necessary here, and honestly, you could probably downgrade to regular Gothics Rests, but I just bring the Super Gothics Rest mostly for the fun of it, and they got rid of the adrenaline effect a while ago that it had to where it would share cooldown with your adrenaline renewal, so it's kind of nice just to be able to use them again. I'll just quickly hover over my rune pouches so you can see the runes that are in here. If you need to pause the video, feel free to do so. And the other notable change from the old guide is we now have Channeler's Ring here with its extra effect. You can buy the enchantment off the GE to get it and just buy the Channeler's Ring. I forget which drop from Rex Matriarchs you used to combine with a bunch of Seer's Rings to make this, but I think Channeler's Ring is somewhat expensive, so if you have Reaver's Ring, but Channeler's with the effect is more DPM now, since we do a lot of G-Conk spamming, and there's no penalty for it. The expensive spices just add a little bit of HP to the blue blubbers. I think it gives an extra 50 on any consumable, so these will do 800 healing instead of 750. I didn't really have anything else to add into the preset, so I just kind of tossed it in there. If I have free space in an inventory, I'll usually just bring it kind of for fun, but also it is kind of nice to have the little extra heal on blubbers, especially if you were really trying to run a budget food setup and run green blubbers. The extra 50 definitely helps out there. The acceleration potion is really nice for the dungeon, and they are relatively cheap, and I use 2 doses per run, and you'll see that later on where I use them. The portents here are just for a simple heal when doing the dungeon. They consume themselves automatically when you drop below half HP. There is a cooldown, but they are nice to have because they are just automatic use. And to wrap things up, the Blessed Flask is just here for prayer renewal. If you don't have a Blessed Flask, you could probably get rid of a couple of these portents, maybe one of them, and have whichever prayer you use. Now, as far as relics are concerned, when running any elite dungeon, this is pretty much the setup I universally use, and it's just because, per usual, I say this a lot, I am deathly afraid of getting a cheese and tomato bata in the dungeon, and I almost never remember to swap over to Luck of the Dwarves, and I don't really want to camp it when running through a dungeon anyway, so I just use the relic here. Hopefully at some point they get the cost of this down to where I could use like COE, Zerk Fury, and Luck of the Dwarves instead of Font of Life, but until then I will just use this setup, and I just toss Blessing of Het in there just for some extra healing. There isn't really too much else I would use. Maybe you could look into just using Font of Life because it's a max increase, or if you don't have mobile on your gear, you could look into Shadow's Grace here, which basically acts like a permanent mobile, which with the dive update would free mobile up from your gear. The only time you wouldn't want to use something like Shadow's Grace is if you have a plan to bring in a melee setup, because you do want the adrenaline gain from Barge, and you want the option to be able to mobile Barge, but this is a magic camp guide, and if magic is your main combat style right now and you're trying to just run through ED2, you could get rid of mobile on your perk setup to add in something else, whether it be Dragon Slayer or some other type of secondary perk, and use this instead of Blessing of Het or Font of Life. Now, as far as the rest of my bank preset is concerned, what I use at ED2 is the Quarm, Incense, Lanta, and Spirit Weed. I do use Powder of Penance, although sometimes I will skip this because it does get kind of expensive, although it usually evens itself out considering the cost of extreme prayers. For those who are wondering, this is just an ogre flask with the thermal bath in it. I use it here so I don't have to go anywhere to take the thermal bath for the HP benefits that it offers. I just do it from the inventory here. And then I have a weapon poison triple plus and a summoning renewal. Usually the weapon triple plus, it doesn't quite last the whole dungeon, but it's usually not too big of an issue. However, when you're using it with Lantadime sticks, you will get it up to 14 minutes, and then it usually does last the whole run. Summoning renewal usually doesn't. However, summoning renewals on Calg Demon is not exactly too useful because you only need to hit Calg Demon once per minute and it's going to recharge on its own. So honestly, you could probably skip summoning renewal. However, it's kind of habitual at this point. I just click it without even thinking and just run off to the dungeon. And then obviously familiar is Calgarian Demon. We need all the crit we can get still because Mage is still a crit forward combat style. And what I mean by that is the more crits you do, the more adrenaline you get, the more damage you do. And the more crits you do, the more FSOA spec still procs, thus the more damage you do. So anything to help out with crit chance, we will take advantage of. But I think that's enough talking. Let's go ahead and just get into an example run. Alrighty, we have the preset loaded up and ready to go. One note I do have to make is that I forgot to put Vuln Bombs in the preset, so I just dropped a Portent of Restoration and put them in there. I made a little editor's note in the beginning of the gear rundown in a text format, and hopefully y'all saw that. But anyways, let's go ahead and get into this run. Now, as I did with the ED1 guide, I will be going back through the dungeon after I do this example run and just kind of explain in more detail some of the surge and bladed dive routing that I do, or any specific lures, anything that I think is really important that I might brush over in this example run. But let's just go ahead and get started. We'll hit normal mode, and then I just surge bladed dive down to here and immediately run over to this area just so I grab the aggro of the other blobs, or the laboratory slime, and then I'll usually just hit a corrupt and a G-chain, charge a detonate, and release it with a D-breath with an auto attack. And here I will tsunami and staff spec, just have those ready to go. Didn't get quite lucky enough with our setup there, but it is what it is. Maybe toss a couple abilities on that guy before I come down to this tile here, and then I'll just try and build adrenaline on this dragon down here. And I'm not getting the best luck on crit chance, but I will drop a sunshine there. And what that allows me to do is, after I kill these two dragons, this one I'm probably not going to be able to beat. I'm in sun range still. But what you can do is then run around this corner, and don't hug the wall, kind of stand one out. It allows you to be in sunshine here, and then get a G-chain on this dragon. Sometimes this guy doesn't like to come over, but it allows you to G-chain Omni inside of a sunshine on these red dragons. Sometimes this guy will walk over, sometimes he doesn't. But it is what it is, and it allows you to clear that a little bit quicker. And then here for the golems, I just like to drop a Corrupt Blast. Target another one, get a G-chain, and then charge a Detonate. Release it with Tsunami. Maybe hit FSOA spec. Just start killing off the ones that I need to. And we're good to go. I'll Bladed Dive Surge diagonally over to this dragon. And just do some abilities here. Maybe hit an Asphyx. Until he does his... Okay, we'll just do that then. And then you only have to kill the dragon and two of the mobs here. That should be number 2. It is. Now we surge through and get all of them trapped behind the furthest dragon. Then what I'll do is, they didn't play too nice as far as pathing is concerned, but I'll target one and just keep working on him and drop mines for the other here. And then hit like a stun and maybe like an ice rack just so he's bound up and doesn't do the heal. And then I'll target the one that hasn't been damaged, get G-chain and go into an Omni Power. It should finish off the other two just like that, and then you can just ice rack. Deal with the stun on the third one, or to stun the third one so he doesn't do his healing. And the healing effect happens after, I think it's 37.5k HP. And any bind or stun will take care of that, and it'll stop the healing effect. And then if you stand behind this one and put this dragon in between you and this dragon up here, this one will block all of the other mobs. So you can just sit here and deal this. If some of them come around, you can just ice barrage them, and it's not too big of a deal. Now for Astellarn, I'll just toss a Vuln Bomb and immediately hit like an Omni Power. Maybe get a Smoke Cloud. I didn't toss my Vuln Bomb. And then I'll go ahead just before 200k, toss an SGB out. And we're already at like 160, now going into the soft cap. And then here, I'll just attack the Pulsar to get to 100. And just drop my Sunshine as soon as I can. I usually plant on this tile. And I'll explain after the run's over a little bit more about some of the nuance with the Astellarn, but I'll just run back to this tile. Wait for the neutron to drop. There. Eat a little bit of food as it's coming over, and then just do like a G-chain into a Wild Magic. Auto into an Omni, and then maybe Tendies, but it should be dead. Dead. Now we have a little bit of FSOA spec to deal with these two guys over here. Do something like a G-chain Asphyx. We do like an ice rack just so he's bound. Oh, he dies from the ice rack. Ice auto is nice because they usually will pop afterwards, but they're bound long enough from the ice auto to where it'll just nullify the time warp effect. Now what I like to do is stand on this tile here and Bladed Dive Surge over across, thus skipping the aggro on the spiders. Sometimes they'll come over and be annoying, but usually they don't if you same ticket. And then for these two Lava Strikes, the eastern one, I will just G-chain into a Dedo and do a auto Dedo D-Breath. Now, what I like to do here is I like to Bladed Dive, use my Accel Pot, Bladed Dive Surge, and just kind of go around this way. That's not my usual pathing, but it ended up working anyway. Now, I like to stand in this area here and just kind of work on these dragons for a little bit to get these ones over. And then what you can do is kind of come over here to the south. I stood too close to the wall, so I had a line of sight. But usually, if you come back a little bit to the south area around here, you'll be able to get G-chain to proc on all 4 of these. And then you can Omni Power then. But I kind of goofed it, but it is what it is. And then just kill these off with maybe some basic abilities. And it's dead. So Bladed Dive up. Surge once your character moves over a line. And then I grab the aggro of these guys and run back this direction. And what I'll do here is just Sunshine and just kind of work on killing these. Nami as soon as possible. The staff spec, maybe G-Conk this guy. Maybe Ice Rack this one into a G-Conk. Make sure to hit my Calg, and then I'll just G-Chain Omni these. If you want to do this with a meta, you could. It would work totally fine. And Surge with a Wild Magic just to finish it off. And then we just run up here, and then I wait until my character moves over a little bit, then I Surge. And on this Lava Strike, I will just put 3 bleeds on it, and then put mines down for this Lava Strike, and then just start killing this guy. And if you D-Breath while under him, then that works as well. The D-Breath will hit this Lava Strike. And here, I'll just G-Chain this guy, hit Omni Power, maybe a Bleed, do like auto rack into that guy, a G-Chain or a G-Conk over here into a G-Staff. G things with magic. Anyways, G-Chain into this guy, Wild Magic. Maybe do like an auto Corrupt Blast, and start working on this one a bit. Go into a G-Staff, Ice Rack, kind of just rinse and repeat usual things. G-Staff is very powerful, it's worthwhile to use, but you also want to try and use Corrupt Blast or Magma Tempest, you know, any of the AoE abilities that you do have. You do kind of want to use those as much as possible. This guy will just do Wild Magic into a Combust and walk him, and then do like an Auto Corrupt and just G-Conk into a D-Breath. And he's dead. Now here, I'll just Bladed Dive, Surge across, and then I'll go over to this skeleton here. And what I like to do for Verak is just kind of move up to this tile, maybe one further, and then hit Anticipate, Surge, target cycle with a Smoke Cloud into an Omni, do a G-Conk, Wild Magic, maybe do an Auto Magma into another Bleed. I'll hit an SGB just because I can. And then just start building up Adrenaline here for a Sunshine. Now we don't have quite the Adren, so I can just auto into a Sun with my A-Pot. Since I already have Insight Fear stacks, I'll just Nami as soon as I can. Ability, FSOA spec, and just kind of just do some standard Sunshine rotation stuff. And just Prey Flick accordingly. If you want, you can disrupt this hit. And just keep DPSing. Don't forget to use your Dragon Slayer Sigil. And just keep DPSing per usual. Target cycle into an auto rack on that guy. And then just DPS him down. Be auto into a G-Conk. Charge up a Detonate. A Tempest going into another Bleed. Do another SGB. You don't necessarily need to have Ingenuity if you want to SGB something. The Dragon Arrows most likely will cover the accuracy requirement, even if you are off-style. And as you can see, relatively easy to take down. Nothing too fancy there. And I like to save my Bladed Dive for going back across, because the pathing across this thing is kind of annoying. So I'll just Bladed Dive across like that, right-click Teleport, and hit Option 4. Now I'll just put on Insight Fear again, and then Surge Bladed Dive, and Surge again. And for these 4, I do like to try and get a Metamorph off. So what I'll do is I'll just get Insight Fear stacks, do a Tsunami, into a Staff Spec, swap over my spell, just hope for crits, try to avoid the Dragon Fire much as I can, hit my Metamorph, and then on this guy I'll just G-Chain, or G-Conk, a G-Chain, use my Sigil again, and just Omni into a D-Breath, and then finish off whatever is left. We hit that one with a G-Staff. It opens up there. And then for these 2, I just like to stand melee distance to this guy. Toss a couple bleeds on. G-Conk into a G-Chain. Charge the Detonate. Don't feel free to use an Overload if you need to. Wild Magic this guy, and oh, didn't even need the Ice Rack. Now here, I'll Surge, and then Bladed Dive Surge again. Oh, didn't have Surge. Fine, and here on the, I'll just kill one Hydrix. It doesn't matter which one you kill. Usually just ice rack into an omni power. You know, it's kind of just the usual rinse and repeat magic threshing. And once you kill one of these, that's when the gate opens, and this is where I'll use my second dose of power or acceleration power burst. And then get to these guys. G-Chain, Deado, rinse and repeat, kind of per usual. Sometimes these play nice, and you can get some really nice AoE effects on them, like with your Dragon Breath or anything like that. Sometimes they're kind of in Narnia and they'll be annoying, so you just have to deal with it. No food, you don't really need food for the last boss. You don't need it for BSD, so it's not really too big of a deal. Just try and go in with relatively high HP. And what I like to do here is line up on this line here. And as soon as I hit this skeleton, that's when I surge, place down some mines, target cycle bleed with smoke cloud, stand on this tile here and start a sunshine. And what this will do is it'll put you in a safe spot for hands in order for you to never have to move when the arms are attacking with like the little crawling hands attack. And I'll just do like auto wild into an asphyx or something like that with a sigil. G-Conk. And he's phased. We got a decent priest phase, but nothing to write home about. Toss some Vuln Bomb down for this guy. Omni this arm. Just put up Protect Mage. That one's already dead because of the mines and the Omni power. Charge up a Deado and release it with Wild Magic into an Asphyx. Also G-Staff if you need to. And then you can just surge through, and then you'll end up on this side. Now, as you'll notice, I'll just attack this one. You have range for both of the hands if you're on this tile, and it works in between any of the sets of arms you choose. And the crawling arms will never hit you from this tile. We'll just thresh this one down, maybe swap back to Insight Fear early. And you can also soul split during this time, but usually I'll surge over, place some mines, and then start a natty build, or a natty rotation, whatever you want to call it. I'll just hit natty. It's simple. Keep it simple. And then here I'll just hit sunshine. And just for safety measures, I'll go ahead and hit disruption shield. Nami, into a staff spec, into another G-Conk, and just start DPSing from here. Use your sigil when you feel like it. I usually try and do it for the Wild Magic Asphyx. Now, if you get the spiral over here, you're going to want to move back towards the west side of your sunshine on this tile, and you won't get hit by the smoke. And just keep DPSing. That was kind of a weak rotation. I didn't get too many crits there, nothing crazy, but in the couple hours I did of testing on stream before I decided to record this, I was getting him down to about 100k. And I think flight skip is possible with Magic Camp. You would just have to get a ridiculously good pre-phase. And then you might be able to get it with a really good sunshine, but with Magic's kind of top-end damage kind of neutered at this point, it's pretty difficult to get a flight skip, at least off-task. Maybe on-task it's a little bit more favorable. Now what you want to do is wait here for 2 jumps after the I could be free of it myself, and then you can just go ahead and start doing like a Nami into an FSOA spec. Swap over to Exsanguinate. If you want to, we have a bit of HP here to deal with, so I'll go ahead and work into a Metamorph. Limitless. Into Attendees. Maybe G-Conk into an Omni Power. And auto G-Conk into a Wild, and he's dead. So that's pretty much the run at ED2. It's pretty straightforward. And with this method of just kind of just running through, doing threshing damage, nothing too insane other than the sunshine in the very beginning, I've been seeing anywhere about 4 runs an hour. It's pretty much on the money, 4 runs an hour. So now what I'll go ahead and do is just run through the dungeon again and just kind of talk over about some of the things I may have missed in the example run, so we'll just continue where we left off. And here again, all I do is immediately as I spawn in the dungeon, you just hit Surge. And then you can bladed dive down to this tile here. And then you can just run across, get the aggro for the slimes, or the bloops as some people call them, and just AoE damage them per usual. And again, I like to drop my sunshine. What I make sure to do is make sure you are hugging this wall and you're on this line of tiles here, and then right where you see this pillar in the wall decoration, this tile right here is the one that I like to sunshine on. So that way when you go around, you will have your sunshine for a couple tiles out. So basically the best way to know you're doing it right is you'll round this corner, and then you can bump out one tile. So that way you're not really going to block line of sight for this dragon here, because if you are against the wall on this tile, this pillar here will block your line of sight for G-Chain on the dragon that's over in this corner walking around. So you want to make sure you're out here, and then you can target the middle one. There's usually one here, 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 and then back here. This guy, sometimes he comes over, sometimes he's not. It's kind of random on his pathing, but that's the easiest way I have found so far to clear out these 4 rather quickly. Plus you can use the sunshine for the other 3 here, and it's overall pretty fast. Now the nice thing about magic as far as its AoE damage is concerned is that G-Chain doesn't really need targets to be close together for it to get its effect out. It has a pretty large reach as far as magic can hit, really. So wherever the magma golems happen to be clumped up, you can pretty much just surge bladed dive to the center, and you can kind of play to where the golems spawn. And as long as they're around you, you want to target whichever one is here. So you can like corrupt this one, G-Chain one of the other ones that are slightly closer. And by the time you have your Deado charged up and you're ready to go, most of them will be close enough to be affected by all of it. And then you can go ahead and hit a tsunami if you want. Sometimes if you're going really fast, you're not going to have tsunami. So maybe you could use a targeted magma tempest before you start this rotation, just kind of on yourself, and just go from there. You don't have to come over to this corner here. You can kind of play anywhere along this wall. I just like to try and get to this corner so that way I can just immediately bladed dive surge. And as you see, if you go on a perfect diagonal here from where I was standing, you'll just zoom right over to this tile, and it gets you clear of pretty much everything in this area. And then you can use this dragon to kind of block everything off. And if you stun this dragon and leave some HP on him, what you can then do is use G-Chain on one of the blobs or one of the books out there, and then just have all of that AoE damage wipe everything out. Now, I wanted to come back here to Astellarn to talk about a couple things. So the reason I like to stand over here on the east side, specifically on this line with the bone floor decoration, is that on this line, you will never get hit by the rain. There is a 1 tile wide gap for the north and south rain spawns. So in theory, you should never get hit by those. And also, if you plant on this, I believe it's this tile here, you have, I think it's almost a 50% chance of the neutron star basically dunking itself or spawning right on top of your wormhole plant, thus allowing you to save a couple seconds and not have to worry about waiting inside of the wormhole taking a bunch of damage. It overall makes it nice, and I believe this area here is the highest percent chance for the neutron star to go ahead and instant dunk. Now again, for the spider skip, I'll usually just be killing these 2 dragons here, and then I click on this upper step here, or the middle step, and then I just kind of go just to the southwest of this tile decoration and just bladed dive surge, and it puts me in this corner, and then you can just deal with the lava strikes, and you shouldn't get too many spider spawns, although sometimes the aggro of the spiders will they'll get to you, and it's just kind of an RNG thing. Now, I kind of goofed up my player movement here, but what I like to do is I will stand on this tile, or as I'm rounding this corner, I will bladed dive to this tile here, and then I will use my acceleration potion as I bladed dive to reset it immediately, and then bladed dive surge once again, and then surge bladed dive around in kind of like a V, and then I surge a couple more times to get to the tile. Again, for this set of 4 black dragons, you can kind of hang out here and use this stalagmite to go ahead and lure in the other 2 black dragons. Then you can move to around this tile somewhere in this area to go ahead and G-Chain either I believe it's this Dragon U G-Chain, and it'll be the third in the lineup, and then the G-Chain will reach all the way down and hit the one behind you. And then you can just Omni Power, use some bleeds and whatnot to just deal the damage to the rest of the dragons. Again, for this area with these 6 black dragons, I'd just like to come down, grab the aggro of these 2, and then run back into this corner here. And then this is where I'll usually drop my Sunshine, somewhere in this area, just using these stalagmites to go ahead and pull the aggro of the dragons around so they're a bit more bunched up. Now, this entrance to Verak Lith can be kind of obnoxious, so what I like to do here again is just bladed dive here, click up, surge across. And then for starting Verak Lith, I use this skeleton here on the tile decoration, or the floor decoration, I should say. Move over on a diagonal and then hit any defensive, surge, and then target cycle with smoke cloud into a. And then once I'm done with the kill, I go ahead and surge over. I try and save bladed dive, or dive in this case, to then go ahead and go over the bridge like this. Because there's some awkward pathing here, it's like a weird kind of zigzag tile that your character runs through, but you can bladed dive over it. Surging does work, but sometimes it's just annoying and it's like, oh, you can't surge in that direction. Sometimes it'll say something like, you can't surge that far, you know, the destination is unreachable or something. It's just usually something, or you get the annoying one tile surge. So I just like to save the bladed dive for coming back. Then you just teleport off per usual. Again, here, I just like to bladed dive and surge through. There's nothing really too fancy here. These 4, they get a metamorph with a FSOA spec to try and kill them faster. And again, once I've killed the Hydrix dragon, this is where I use my acceleration potion and just kind of surge bladed dive all along this area to then kill these 2 dragons and get into BSD. Hopefully you found this guide helpful. Leave a comment down below if you'd like to see anything added. But before this dragon decides to murk me, I think we're going to teleport out and roll that outro. Ladies, gentlemen, and I did not forget about you lucky charms. Thank you very much for watching. Your viewership is greatly appreciated. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, nighttime, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I will see you next time for the next guide. Peace.